Hi, I'm Antonio Mora. The infuriating state of American politics has me struggling between two extremes. Either to rant like the character Howard Beale in Network that I am mad as hell and I can't take it anymore, or just giving up and becoming a victim of outrage fatigue. My outrage today is how it's incomprehensible that politicians have not learned that comparing the horrors of Nazi Germany and the mass slaughter of the Holocaust to pretty much anything is stupid, on top of being offensive and just plain wrong. We should never forget and apply the lessons from the Nazi genocide to the present and the future, but those horrors should not be used glibly by politicians hoping to push an agenda. The following comments, of course, are inspired by Congresswoman AlexandriaOcasio-Cortez. I'll get to her in a moment. But Republicans are just as culpable. Over a period of 2 days in March, 2 congressmen invoked Hitler and the Nazis on the House floor to attack Democrats, the media, and the Mueller probe. These politicians haven't learned from an internet adage called Godwin's Law. It states that the longer an online discussion goes, the greater the likelihood someone will compare someone or something to Adolf Hitler or his deeds, at which point the discussion ends. That applies to real life and politics. Any politician with half a brain should know to follow a simple rule to not use Nazi Germany as a reference point. Enter Ocasio-Cortez.
The United States is running concentration camps on our southern border. And that is exactly what they are. They are concentration camps.
AOC seemingly didn't know the rule, further proving that she is rapidly becoming the Donald Trump of the left, using hyperbole and inaccurate terminology to shock, intentionally and unintentionally. Republicans and some Jewish groups pounced, with the Wiesenthal Center calling her comments an insult to victims of the Holocaust. But some Democrats, members of the media, and historians defended her, saying her use of concentration camp was appropriate. The war of words has continued to this day, so I'm going to break it down, trying to be fair to both sides. First, AOC initially defended herself by defining concentration camp in the simplest way possible as the mass detention of civilians without trial, arguing that under that definition it's accurate to describe the detention facilities at the border as concentration camps. She's right. If you ignore that history has made modern usage of the term immediately evoke the Nazi camps. It's silly to argue otherwise. In its definition, Merriam-Webster says the term is used especially in reference to camps created by the Nazis in World War II. The Oxford Dictionary says it is most strongly associated with the several hundred camps established by the Nazis in Germany and occupied Europe. Second, that said, if we're being literal, AOC is also right to argue that concentration camp is not limited to Nazi camps. Sadly, concentration camps have existed for more than a century, and they exist today in North Korea, Myanmar, and China. More than 1.5 million people perished in the forced labor camps of the Soviet Gulag, some of which remained open until the collapse of the USSR. Does she really want to compare the nightmarish realities at those camps to what's happening at the Mexican border? Third, her simplistic definition is also not in sync with many dictionaries because they go further, defining concentration camps to include brutal conditions, forced labor, or their use for mass executions. Fourth, under AOC's definition, one would have to conclude that many refugee camps around the world today are concentration camps because they have worse conditions than the U.S. detention facilities for migrants, and the refugees are confined. Does she want to accuse the United Nations, other countries, and charitable NGOs of running concentration camps? Fifth, AOC also defended herself by using other semantics, attacking her critics by saying they didn't know the difference between Nazi concentration camps and extermination camps. There's certainly a distinction, even though some Nazi camps operated as both. But that ignores the fact that many thousands were tortured and killed in Nazi concentration camps that weren't technically death camps. Sixth, also, were U.S. migrant detention facilities not concentration camps under President Obama? The situation has certainly worsened with the larger influx of migrants, but detention facilities aren't new. About 20 miles from where I sit, there's a detention center that's been around for half a century, and where conditions are described as somewhere between a prison and a restricted military barracks. Is that a concentration camp? Seventh, even if you don't like AOC, you have to accept that she meant well. Reports describe horrid conditions at some U.S. detention facilities, with children in cages, sleeping on concrete floors, and living in unsanitary conditions with extreme temperatures. Trump administration lawyers have even argued in federal court that migrant children don't need soap or toothbrushes to comply with rules that demand they be housed in facilities that are safe and sanitary. Eighth, while it's essential that migrants be treated humanely and that pressure be exerted to demand the government comply with legal requirements, it's also fair to remember that border authorities are faced with a massive task as migrants flood into the U.S. Apprehensions at the U.S. border with Mexico reached 440,000 in just the first 5 months of 2019. That's more people than live in Oakland or Minneapolis. And ninth, if we accept AOC's basic definition of concentration camp as mass detention without trial, what would she have the U.S. do? What's the alternative to detention facilities? A full open borders policy that allows everybody in? That wouldn't fly even with most Democrats. A couple of points to conclude. Instead of calling attention to the conditions at migrant camps, we are spending more time arguing about semantics than the crisis itself. AOC's inflammatory rhetoric made this about her, not the migrants, and Republicans were all too happy to let that be the case. This is the greatest country in the world. Whatever its faults, America has sacrificed hundreds of thousands of lives and trillions of dollars just over the past century trying to make the world a better place. With that greatness comes the responsibility to care for migrants who come to our border, hoping for their own American dream. That means housing them as best we can.